All right, what's up, Temple Knights of Thaunt and other First Law enthusiasts? Welcome to another Phantology episode. This one may be a little bit quicker just because the book is a little bit shorter here. We're talking Sharp Ends by Joe Abercrombie, which is in fact a collection of his short stories that you shouldn't read until after you've read Red Country and maybe before you've read the Age of Madness series. So Ryan and I are both at that point in our readings. Neither one of us have read A Little Hatred. So Ryan, what did you think of Sharp Ends?
I was pleasantly surprised, which I mean, I've never really read through an entire collection of short stories like you have with The Witcher. So I wasn't really expecting, I don't know, it was a little bit more cohesive than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. For whatever reason, short stories are not a huge draw for me. For
Hmm.
for whatever reason, right? I guess I'm just kind of used to the big long epic fantasy, and when you think, oh, this one's shorter, it just seems different, and sometimes we don't like things that are different. But in this case, I'm with you. I was really into this collection of short stories. I mean, no surprise, if you like Joe Abercrombie, you're gonna like this book as well.
Yeah, typical Joe Abercrombie. I mean, most of the stories have very dark undertones and lots of bad things happen to main characters. So if you're not a fan of that stuff, you're not going to be a fan of this. But people probably aren't going to be watching this review unless they're a fan of Joe Abercrombie, I assume.
And you're also not going to read Sharp Ends unless you've read the other books, or you're going to have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I it would be very confusing to say the least.
It's very much a tribute to the fans here, maybe a little bit. We have several different characters throughout the previous six books that show up. Not everyone, but a lot of characters do. You get different viewpoints from folks you haven't seen inside their heads nearly as much. You get some backstory that's only been talked about for some characters, and there is an entire new narrative for two new characters. I think they have at least four stories to themselves. Might have to fact check myself right away. Four, possibly five. And they are just as memorable as a lot of Joe's characters from the full length novels, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, it was cohesive, and part of what added to that was the fact that a lot of these short stories were actually following the same characters at different points in their life. Um, like Javra and what was the name of uh,
Chevedia.
Chevedia? Yes. So following Javra and Chevedia, there were a few stories that really just kind of pulled it together. You could always look forward to those chapters. And then, not to mention, or also to mention, that a lot of the other stories centered around characters or events that we're already familiar with. So I think all of those kind of helped it feel a little bit less disconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. It read as if it was almost like a history of what we'd seen, but you're getting small snapshots from different parts that really kind of piece together a lot of previous events. Definitely not necessary to read, right? You're going to get your full breadth of the story, of the First Law story, without reading the short stories. But if you're a completionist and you really enjoyed what you've read thus far, I think it's really hard to pass up on this one.
Yeah. Just on a little bit off topic, I think we always rave about Joe Abercrombie's novels, but Stephen, you and I are the last one standing out of all of us who started Best Served Cold on. I guess it was just you, myself, Ben, and Josh, right? Jake never started it.
Yeah. Out of the Pentology 5, we're still waiting to jumpstart Jake's journey into First Law. Ben and Josh are the first trilogy and Best Served Cold. And they have fallen off the bandwagon for
Yeah.
some reason. I mean, they have a reason. There's a lot of books to read, right? And they just haven't kept on going. But we
Yeah.
appear to be the biggest fans. Although, from what you've said, you will be falling off the bandwagon soon because I'm going to read A Little Hatred and be ready for The Trouble with Peace,
Yep.
which comes out in a couple of weeks, but you will not be ready, sadly.
I won't be. This is going to be my last Joe Abercrombie video for a while, mainly because mainly in anticipation of Rhythm of War, which will be coming out on November 17th. So I am doing my due diligence as a Sanderson fanboy and rereading Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, which I'm currently on, and then I'm going to read Warbreaker, Edge Dancer, Oathbringer, and finally Rhythm of War.
So just a few books there.
And my wife and I are going to be having a baby sometime while I'm reading those. So I don't know if I'm going to have any time for A Little Hatred or Trouble with Peace.
What is the chance that the baby's name ends up being Kaladin?
Yeah, I think we can safely say the baby will not be named Kaladin. Although my wife Sydney did mention that she liked the name Elend when we were reading Mistborn, but
just sneak that in there. Okay.
I'm actually not the biggest fan of the name Elend, so I don't think that's going to be the name either.
What about Brando Sando?
Yeah, Brando Sando.
A little bit of a mouthful, maybe. Not a great first name.
Maybe if Brandon Sanderson himself agreed to give me the #1 copy for all of his upcoming Stormlight Archive books, I would definitely agree to that. So who cares about my son's name? It's really the Stormlight Archive, which will be the lasting legacy of our lives.
Very true. Anyway, let's get back on topic. Let's
tangent. Okay.
Yeah, a good tangent. But to start off with Sharp Ends, so this doesn't need to be a super long review, and I think it'll kind of naturally tie itself up more quickly since there's not as much here as we typically cover in an episode. But I have some notes on each of the stories, and I'll just kind of remind you what they were. We'll get some thoughts and talk through maybe some of what we liked, what we didn't like, characters, etc. Maybe some significance of events that we might have seen. And then towards the end, let's each of us have like our top 3 stories from the collection.
Okay.
So story 1, and we'll do this in publication order. It's in chronological order, except for the very last one is actually the second chronologically. But story number 1 is in the year 566. It's called A Beautiful Bastard, and it is primarily about Glokta before the events of the original trilogy, before he was captured and tortured by the Gurkish, and we see him as the magnificently conceited person that he was. He still is, but before he is tortured, we kind of see who he was completely. It's almost like we're seeing a shell of that person by the time the original trilogy starts. So what did you think of this view on Glokta?
It was super interesting. You see him kind of as his more confident, like socially accepted. He's kind of at the top of, I guess, the social pecking order at this point in his life. He's on top of the world, and he's really not a good guy. You can tell all he really cares about is seducing girls and winning fights, and doesn't really care who else gets hurt along the way.
He's kind of like Iron Man at the beginning before he became a real Avenger.
Yeah, Tony Stark ish. Yeah, definitely a vibe like that. And I almost feel like after he's tortured, it's more like his exterior matches what's inside, because before he's just this very handsome person, and the viewpoint that you're watching it from, what's that guy's name? Pike. It's Inquisitor or
Salem Ruse, right? The guy who he tortures at the very beginning of the trilogy.
He's just so conflicted in his thoughts about Jezza. He's just always he's like, man, I hate him, but I love him, and he's like, he just makes fun of me, but I'm still gonna suck up to
Right.
him no matter what.
Yeah, Glokta's got this crew of sycophants that are willing to use him, just give him whatever he wants in order to make their own way up the social ladder, of which he stands at the very top. It's like how everyone laughs at the boss's jokes, and everyone just clings off of everything Glokta does.
And at the end of the story, off he goes. Did I call him Jezza? I did. I did call him Jezza. For some reason, I was getting them confused. But yes, I meant
There's some
Glokta.
similarities, obviously. There's supposed to be.
Yes, so Glokta, he rides off into the sunset with victory all but assured, at least in his mind. And
we know it is literally going to be a sunset of swords for him.
Yeah, he's going to get captured by the Gurkish, and his life will never be the same.
One other thing that you didn't mention was West appears in the story, as well as Tunney from the Heroes. Kind of funny to see him, but West has a larger part to play in the little story because he's dueling with Glokta, mostly for sport. But then, as they're dueling, West is somehow better than Glokta thinks, and he scores a touch on him with their practiced foils. And then Glokta is like, I'm going to kill you now because you dishonored, you shamed me in front of these people, and now we're using real swords, and he's literally trying to kill his friend of sorts. And that just really shows you where Glokta's at.
James Glokta. Made me miss Colonel West.
Yeah, I never liked his fate. I mean, I'm okay with characters being killed off, but he just got written off so casually with no real, like, we never actually saw him die. It was just like, oh, he is sick now, and also he's withering away, and goodbye.
Yeah, he was, like most of Abercrombie's characters, he was a good character with significant flaws, and it just kind of got written out. It wasn't satisfying. He didn't die in a heroic way, it just wasn't a satisfying ending for me. And
agreed.
This short story reinforced that a bit.
Yeah, I didn't think he had the greatest arc, but small criticism. Okay, story number 2 is called Small Kindnesses. It takes place in 573, and this is our intro into Javre and Chevedia. And this story, I don't think there's a whole lot to write home about. It's mostly just to introduce who these guys are. And when I was first reading it, I was like, okay, that story was finished. What was the point of it? We saw Severard briefly as a, he was involved with Chevedia at the time. But other than that, I mean, there's some fighting. They meet. Didn't love this one.
Yeah, it was mainly just setting things up. I agree. I wasn't super interested in this story. You're not really familiar with any of the characters beforehand, except Severard, who wasn't that major of a character. I think he's a fairly minor character in the first trilogy.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel particularly attached to him.
What do you think of maybe this is the time to talk about this? What do you think of Javre and Chev as a whole, in terms of, did you like the fact that they had all these different stories in different parts of the world? They were almost like a Forrest Gump-ish type of tale where they were present for all these big events, but in the distance, and they were observing things and interacting with others. But like, did you like that? Was that was it too heavy-handed, or was it fun?
I thought it was fun for me. I enjoyed reading about them, and definitely seeing the different perspective you get from characters who aren't as attached to the main storyline as you go through. I thought it was a fun read.
I thought so too. I thought Chev was maybe too similar of a character to Shy from Red Country. I couldn't distinguish them a whole lot. I mean, I know there are differences, but just in terms of like their internal monologues and who they were. They felt similar to me, maybe just because they both started with SH and they were like female characters of slighter builds, both of them. I don't know. That was just one thing.
Who have troubled pasts.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of similarities there. Maybe they could have been a little more distinct.
Yeah, that's true. The difference is, though, that Chevedia likes girls, whereas Shy likes boys.
There's that. This difference in sexuality. Okay, book 3, The Fool Jobs, takes place a year later. This is a Kerndon Craw plus his dozen story, and they're sent to recover some kind of thing by, I think by Bethod at the time. And you see Warren, who is grumpy. Currently, we see Warren, I guess Warren, in a couple different states of mind here. He's in a later story, he's in an entirely different mood. And this is like a small scale look on these guys that we know from the heroes pretty well. What did you think of this one?
So this is, if I'm remembering correctly, this is Weirin before he's made a name for himself. In the heroes, everybody knows about Weirin and his sword, and I just remember how he can talk down a threat of combat just by saying, "Do you want me to unsheath my sword? Because if I unsheath my sword, it has to be sated with blood." But in this story, Kerndon Craw he thinks about him in his head, and they think he's pretty weird, right? They're just like, he's this weird guy who doesn't really wear any armor, doesn't wear a shirt, and so it's a little bit fun to see how they treated him before.
I mean, they always thought he was weird, right? They call him Cracknut.
Yeah, I guess
little nickname.
I guess that's true, but they didn't have the accompanying respect. Is it at the end of this short story where Weirin kills a bunch of people on his own?
Well, he definitely does in Two's company, but is it in this one as well? I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I thought it was in that one. Everybody, because this is the story where they are infiltrating, or they're trying to steal this object,
right?
And Kerndon notices the object, and then his other member of his crew accidentally on purpose steals the goblet because they think it's the proper thing, or he thinks that's the thing that they were supposed to steal, and then it turned out that the church burned down or whatever with the item they were supposed to get.
And this just kind of highlights again one of the big themes from the heroes, in that war and these types of things are just so pointless, and there's so much miscommunication and bumbling errors, and really best to avoid entirely.
Yeah, that's a pretty common thing of Joe Abercrombie books, is just war and battle is just a waste of life, really.
I do think it's funny when Craw finally sees the Father of Swords, when Weirin unveils it. He looks at it and he's like, "This is just a big hunk of metal. This thing is so overrated. Why is it called the Father of Swords?"
Yeah.
All right, story number 4. We're back with Chev and Javre, and they are fleeing another disaster that's happened. There is much destruction here as they skip town. And this is where we get introduced to these Temple Knights of Thond, which is a real interesting but very nebulous idea. Like, all we know really are that there are these knights and they have different powers, and it appears to be different than the magic that we've seen in other aspects. Like, it's different than the Baez magic, and it's different than the Gurkish magic and Eater magic. But really, I can't tell you a whole lot about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it starts to reveal a little bit more about Javra's past. But I guess to highlight what you're saying is, recently like I said, I've been reading a lot of Sanderson books where his magic systems are just very well defined, and it's almost scientific in the way that magic works in
Yep.
his worlds. But this is in Joe Abercrombie's book. There's a wide variety of different magics that it's not well explained how they work, and you can't go asking yourself or asking a lot of questions exactly about why things are the way that they are. They just are. It's why do people get power when they eat human flesh? I don't know. They just do. They just become
Right.
superhuman.
Right. It's very much a soft system. Sanderson is on the complete other side of the spectrum with his hard magic system. It's a preference thing.
Mm-hmm.
Both are valid ways to construct a story. So let's go on to story number 5, which is Hell. This is a popular one, I know. It might be because it's through the eyes of Temple. It's the fall of Daguska, which we saw in the second book of the trilogy and before they were hanged. We saw this through Glokta's eyes. Now we're seeing it a little bit more intensely through Temple's eyes. And I don't like this was a highlight for me. I enjoyed this story.
Yeah, I really liked this story. This is definitely one of my favorite stories. You see a bit more about Temple, and he's, just his old habits, kind of where he has good intents, but he has good intents, but it never really follows through with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the same internal dialogue within him where he wants to run away, but his master, that high priest, is his name Cardii?
Kadia.
Cadia. Yeah, he is
He's like the only truly good character in the entire
yeah,
series, right?
he just bravely faces down these eaters, and his very heroic response is when the eaters threaten, they say, we'll either take all these people or we'll take you. And he's like, that's a poor bargain. I would have traded my life for any single person here.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes off, possibly to die. I'd like to think that maybe he's not dead, but seems like most people are against me there.
Yeah, the exact line I think I remember, they say something about we will convey you to the table of the prophet, right?
Yeah,
Like as if
prophet's
they're
table.
going to eat him.
Yeah. And one thing I did like, another thing that I liked was when he was talking to the head eater Mamoon and talking about choices, and you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of see behind in the mask of Mamoon in the first trilogy. I thought that Mamoon was more portrayed as just pure villain, not a lot of good to him. But here you can see that he regrets a lot of his choices, and I think he even says that if he could go back, maybe he would have done things differently. But he can't, and so that's something I wasn't expecting to see, is this hint of regret in Mamoon's facade. Sorry, my wife let my cat into the room, and now she's crawling all over the place. So
It's all
apologies.
right. It's all right. The viewers want the real authentic behind the scenes look at
Yeah.
phantology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that this series of short stories sharpens really does in several different ways, is gives you different views into what was previously established in the other books. There are, I mean, especially with Glokta, we already talked about that. Now with Mamoon, and then at the end with Logen and Bethod, and there are probably some other examples as well. Really kind of takes what you may have suspected about characters, or maybe it was just hinted at, and given you another view that gives you even another angle on them.
Yeah.
So next story, Two's Company. This is another Giavre and Chev story. I think this was my favorite of their stories. This is the bridge story. This was the other
Mm-hmm.
story with Weirin, and they are crossing this bridge out in the middle of nowhere in the north. And it's very funny as Giavre and Weirin have this bizarro battle of their levels of pride, and then they get into some conflict with some additional Temple Knights and with some Northmen. There's a lot of parallels in what's going on here. What do you think of this one?
I thought it was pretty funny. I liked this one a lot as well. Just the back and forth between Weirin and Javra, and you're cringing along with Shavedia as these
Yeah.
two people, these two warriors with enormous egos are just unwilling to back down. And then I thought the ending was a little bit weird, where Javra and Weirin just kind of go off to the side and have sex. But besides that, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, Sheb is the adult in the room, and Javra and Weirin are both basically children trying to, I guess, compare measurements, we'll say.
Yeah. And then at the end, they have the cool battle with the is it the Northmen who are after Weirin of Bly?
Yeah, the Northmen are after Weirin, and then the Temple Knights of Thond come after Jabra, and in both cases, they help each other with their conflict. And then at the end, they're like, okay, we're going to go off our separate ways. Oh, wait, but you have to go first, or I have to go first. And they back to the whole who's going to cross the bridge first. It's a very tightly knit story.
I thought at the end they agreed they would travel together for a little bit and help each other out.
They do. There was another thing where they were comparing. They were trying to determine who was going to be the first to do something. I remember it called back to the bridge thing at the beginning really well.
Okay.
Okay, next story is Wrong Place, Wrong Time. This is essentially the best served cold behind the scenes story. This was a story that had 3 separate parts to it, 3 different points of view, and you saw some of the main catastrophic events through boots on the ground types points of view. So you saw the poisoning of Malthus and the rest of the bank. You saw the whole Sapani disaster. You saw Gost as well, and then you saw the battle at Osprey, and in that one you actually see Shivers and Monza. So this one was another good one. I like the minor characters that Joe likes to put in there and establish things through their eyes. And I always like to get behind the scenes on something we've seen already.
Yeah, it does reinforce the tragedy of some of the events in Best Served Cold for sure. You see the hopes, ambitions, struggles of this accountant clerk who works under Malthus, and
this nobody.
Yeah, he's essentially nobody, but Abercrombie kind of introduces you to him a little bit, and you get a sense of his life, and then he dies at the end of that story. And I guess it gives you another sense of all of the lost life when they poison all of those people who work at the bank just to kill one Malthus, just for vengeance. And I maybe that story helps reinforce that point a little bit more.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, you see this small guy's hopes and dreams and his wife and his child, and then he dead, and who's going to take care of his family, and how's that going to work? And who knows? But
not Valentin Bulk, that's for sure.
Certainly not. The Sapani story I thought was good as well. Kind of the similar types of things. You see things through the eyes of who was this? I think we just see things. No, you see things through the eyes of. Yeah, you see things through the eyes of a whore there that's like servicing.
Oh yeah.
Gost. Yeah, and she gets killed in the fire and everything. And then the final battle, I thought this was my favorite one because it's again a nobody that's fighting, and then at the end he turns sides to join the winning team, and he's like, "Yeah, go Monza."
Yeah, he's like, thank goodness I didn't get a uniform.
At the beginning he's like jealous and he wants a uniform, and then by the end he's like, oh, good thing I didn't have one of those or I'd be dead.
Yeah. Wait, so Bremerdan Gorst, he was in Sapani, that's right.
Right. Very fateful event in several different books now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So next story is the Red Country backstory for Shy. So this one, I'm going to say, was the saddest story for me. At the time, Shy was an outlaw. She goes by Smoke. She acquires a bunch of gold and is on the run from her old comrades, and eventually ends up killing them and loses all of the money. And it's just real sad.
Yep. I don't remember this one all that well. I think I glossed over the combat a little bit. I just got the sense that she was just in a very desperate battle for her own life and
Yeah,
somehow comes out on top with each
she
successive
essentially
attack.
winds up in this ghost town, and she's fighting her old bandit friends and kills them one by one. And then as the last one dies, he throws the gold into the well, and Shy goes to grab it, and she does, but then the sack breaks and all the gold tumbles down the well. And once again, the whole thing was for nothing because she lost everything and didn't even get gold at the end and was seriously wounded. And, this is obviously the scars that she's carrying up until the events of Red Country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
next we have another battle story. This one is from the heroes. Well, it's not necessarily from the heroes, but it's related to that time period. It's through the ideas of Gost, who's now it's through the eyes of Gost, who's now the royal observer of the war. He's reporting back to King Jezza, and this one also has several different viewpoints, multiple viewpoints. We kind of like jump from character to character as they die or have unfortunate things happen to them. So really like the same beats as the heroes in this one.
This was very interesting because it gives you two different perspectives of Gorse. You see one perspective where he politely walks up to the Northmen, and the Northmen's really worried that they're just gonna take everything of value and possibly kill him and his family.
Yeah.
And so he's worried, and Gorse is just like, "Oh, do you think I can have a cup of milk?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay." And then the the battle ensues. I think the Union army is attacked by some Northmen. Then Gorse goes out to fight some people, and then you see it switches to the perspective of a Union soldier near Gorse. He's like, "Oh yes, finally, I'm gonna fight next to somebody who's like a skilled fighter. This is what I signed up for." And
Yeah.
then Gorse, without even just in his bloodlust rage, just kind of kills him by swinging his sword just in the end. So you see this bloodthirsty side of Gorst, and then after that he goes back to the place and he like pays them a ton of money just for the glass of milk, and he's like, "Thank you, I'm sorry for the trouble," and then leaves. And there's so many different ways you can take this. You see the differences in people. There's always some good and some bad in these stories. You see the waste of life and resources. This Northman has been working so hard to grow these crops, and they're just destroyed by the Union. And then you see this third guy who's following Gorst and finally hoping to gain some glory and honor, and
Mm-hmm.
just gets killed offhandedly. And so, I mean, what a waste war and death are in these situations.
Not the first time we've seen friendly fire from Gorst. Probably
Yeah.
not the last time that he will do so in his bloodlust rage. And
Mhm.
yeah, I like how you talked about all those different things because Joe does a great job of giving you all these different views and then saying like war kind of makes none of it make sense. Really, like
Mhm.
that you could have someone like Gerst be so
Yeah.
kind and on one side, and then on the other he's just indiscriminately killing and doesn't care who
Mhm.
dies.
Yeah.
Also, you had some thoughts concerning the horses that died, right? That stuck with you.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me about that. I mean, I think reading fantasy, you're a little bit desensitized to people dying. And so for me, that doesn't bother me as much. But then it's just always sad for me when animals are killed, and I don't necessarily know why it's a lot more sad. But then there's this Northman who's sneaking around and he's just killing all of these horses because he was commanded or he was ordered to, and he's just thinking about how one of these horses would just make so much of a difference in his village back home, and
Yeah.
here he is just slaughtering them and thinking to himself like this is sad, but ultimately he keeps doing it because that's what he's ordered to do.
I know you were just saying today that you were a little torn up over the fate of a certain Sureblood.
Yes.
No spoilers there.
Yeah.
But if
yeah,
you know, you know.
you know.
All right, next story. Three's a Crowd. This is another Javra and Shavedia story. This one, this is the one where Kharkov. Dang, I'm saying that wrong. Kharkov. This is Shev's lover of sorts that she's always trying to figure out if she really loves her or not, or if she's about to betray her. Gets taken, right? Shev thinks that she is betraying her, but she's been taken by Harald the Finger, and then Shev has to bust in with drunk Javra in order to save her. But then at the end of the day, there are a bunch of temple knights come in. This was a good one, I think, for both of their characters. It showed another side. This time it was Shev who was doing the cool stuff, and Javra, who was more of the idiot and wasn't. I mean, Javra is always kind of the comic relief. But at the same time, there's a lot going on in this one. Like the plot might have been a little too much for the amount of page space that we got in this one.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Just and you forgot to mention, I believe at the beginning of this story, you see Monza and her son. Her son is crowned as king
Right. That's right. That's right.
of the kingdoms, and you're
Of
still not
Syria.
sure of Styria, and you're still not sure is this Logan's son or is this actually
Shivers.
uh, I've done that before and I'll probably do it again. Is this
Yeah.
Shivers' son,
There's a
or
similarity there too.
is this the son of that other guy who crowned himself king, but the crown was poisoned and at the end of Best Served Cold?
Yeah. Dang, I know that guy's name, but it's not coming to mind right now.
we encounter so many different names in fantasy that a lot of
Probably
them.
starts with an S.
He was like the Duke of Austria. I don't know. So anyways, that's kind of a big event that we get some sort of hint at where Monza is at, because we've seen Shivers in a lot of these standalone novels, and we have a sense of what he's moved on to, but we didn't necessarily know with Monza, and now we see that she's consolidated power enough to crown her own son king.
She's basically the most powerful person in the world right now. They've turned back the Union a few times at least, and she's now got control over all of Styria. And I do know who I know the name now.
Okay.
And I didn't even look it up. I started Googling and then I remembered. It's Rogant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a noteworthy name.
Yeah. I mean, and he wasn't a super noteworthy character other than winning a couple battles and dying from a poisoned crown.
Yeah. Anyways, getting back to your point that this story...
But no, you're right, because I think that event might be the biggest event in this entire collection of short stories as far as like where is it going from here, because the fact that Monza is leading Styria and Styria is so powerful, that's got to be important for our next trilogy.
Yeah.
I'm assuming.
I don't know. I haven't even looked up the description for A Little Hatred, so I don't even know where the story where it begins in that book. So it certainly could have. I mean, Monza,
Yeah,
being the queen, de facto queen. or I guess the mother of the king is better.
The only thing I know about it, and this is not a spoiler because it's in the description, and I just kind of glanced at it, was it heavily features the daughter of Glokta and Adi West. Well, not really Glokta, right? But she is. I think
it's Jezza's daughter, right?
Right. She's featured.
Okay.
So I'm assuming Union.
Okay, maybe that sounds familiar. Maybe I did read the description once upon a time.
Anyway, you were saying.
Well, I was agreeing with you that there's a lot crammed into this because Shivedia comes back. She thinks that Harald the Finger has forgiven her for killing his son. And then she comes back and her apartment is ransacked and Kharkov is missing. And so then she runs to Javra, tries to get her help. Of course, Javra is her best friend, so she agrees to help. Then they go assault the Herald the Fingers castle.
They have a nice moment of realizing how much they mean to each other as well. This is after years of working together, and they're kind of on the outs. They've been on the outs a little bit with Shev's recent success. And then there's this moment where Shev realizes exactly, that Jabra is her best friend. And that was a nice moment. I was touched by that.
That was at the end, right? When she realizes that this has all been set as a trap to attract Shivedia, because they knew that she would enlist Javra's help. And so she brings Javra.
Right. Well, it's all a trap for Jabra. Yeah. Is that when she realizes, or is it when they're rowing over in the boat? I thought it was beforehand, and then it calls back to it when they realize that Jabra's been trapped here.
It could have been rowing in the boat. I just remembered the ending part where she thinks about how Javra dropped everything to come and help her, and Kharkov hasn't really done that. Kharkov has always comes and goes as she wants, and very unreliable.
Kharkov is the worst.
It really is. She just has the good looks.
It's a toxic relationship. You got to get out of that one, Shev.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shev, go find somebody else who will love you.
Okay, next story, and there's only 3 more here. So next one is Freedom, and this one is fun for a few reasons. One, because it's actually read by Joe Abercrombie. One, because it's got some kind of weird noise, but one is fun because it's read by Joe Abercrombie, not by Stephen Pacey. Stephen Pacey is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but I think it's cool that the author's reading his own story. And 2, it's fun because it's this entirely falsified account of the actual events of Red Country, but it's like what you would have read based off of the book version of the events, with Swarbrick writing down what Casca was doing. So it was just perfectly witty and dark in a way that featured all of Abercrombie's talents. I thought this was fantastic.
Yeah, it was, a very over embellished, falsified account of what's that guy's name? Oh my gosh.
Of Casca and Aberstock?
Of Casca. And you just listen to it and just it's mainly just comic relief. You just chuckle at all the glorious actions and the incredible regret that that Casca has as he goes through. But everybody having read the heroes knows, or read Red Country knows, that anything but was glorious.
Couldn't you tell how much fun Abercrombie had writing this story? This totally just felt like a pet project for him that he was able to actually publish.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but I think that shows because he wanted to read it.
Yeah, I think there's a reason he wanted to read it. Also, follow-up question, is Swarbrick Joe Abercrombie? Is that who he's supposed to be in terms of, did he write himself? Yeah, did he write himself into the story and give himself a new name?
I'll have to think about that.
I kind of like to think that it is, but I have no reason to think that it is. I wonder if there's some like words of Joe supporting that. But if you're an author, that's that's who you would be, right? And at the end, Swarbrick is somewhat of a hero. I feel like Joe's writing himself in here, but I don't know.
As a relatively minor character who plays a
Yeah,
somewhat major part. And the funny thing also was the story, how it was found. It was crumpled up inside an old boot or something along those lines, or
yeah. There was a foreword to the story that talked about the history of finding this manuscript.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think that alone makes it worth at least renting the audiobook from a library if you can. Just it's fun to read or to listen to Joe Abercrombie telling his own story and the fun that he has with it. I mentioned this to you before, Stephen. It does also give me an appreciation for Stephen Pacey, just the level of training that he has, and
Yeah,
I think that it's just, he's like a true professional. As good as Joe Abercrombie was, you realize that Stephen Pacey is just very professional narrator. Probably one of my favorite, honestly.
yeah. He's fantastic. I think he's my top audiobook narrator of books that
Yeah.
I've listened to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure there's lots of great ones, but as far as my experience, he's number one. He's not just a narrator, he does a lot of professional things. He's an actor. So he does have that training. And yeah, it takes more than just a passion for reading to be an audiobook narrator, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe it crushes my dream of narrating one day. Seems like a sweet gig.
Maybe until you get a book, an epic fantasy novel, and you have no clue how to pronounce anybody's names, and then you pronounce one person's name wrong the whole time, and all the fans hate you.
Yeah, like Jake from Phantology hates you.
Yeah. Sir Snobbian of pronunciation.
Yeah, that's a Phantology deep cut. All right, second to last story is Tough Times All Over. This is another fun one with multiple viewpoints as we follow a mysterious package that is going all over. Where is it? I think it's somewhere in Sapani, but I might be wrong there, so fact check me there. Anyway, it doesn't really necessarily matter where it is, but it is fun seeing all the different factions that are trying to get this package, and Javra and Shavedia are once again involved in this. So what is the package? That's kind of the big mystery.
I think part of the story is you never know, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't think we ever will know. You're right.
And it's just another fun story told by Joe Abercrombie of all these characters and just this huge convoluted story of one person robbing another, robbing another, robbing another, and finally it ends up right back where it started in Kharkov's hands.
And I love these multiple viewpoint things. It's amazing that I feel like Joe Abercrombie, maybe other authors try to do this as well, but Abercrombie does it way better than anyone else I've ever read. It's amazing how he draws you into these real minor characters on these short viewpoints.
Yeah, in such a short amount of pages, he can really tell quite a lot.
It's something he likes to throw in is just like a change of pace in a lot of his books as well. I know there's at least one chapter in The Heroes. There's one in Best Served Cold. There's one in Last Argument of Kings. There may be one in some other books as well. But every time they come up, I always love those chapters.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the final story. And we backtrack in time to before it all happened. This story is Made a Monster. And I know you have some thoughts with a capital T about this story, because we finally get to see our main man, Logen, in a different light. We also get to see Bethod in a different light, as well as Calder and Scale. And how much did this story change things for you, Ryan?
Well, I think not as much as I think immediately following the story, I thought of Bethod as maybe he wasn't that bad of a guy, and wow, Logan was just a really bad person and deserved everything he got. And I think my controversial opinion came more as I thought about the events of this story, because you really see how Bethod, he really desires peace, and ultimately Logan has he's used Logan kind of as a tool to get where his success is, but now that he wants peace, he's not sure that Logan in his current state will fit in. And it's tragic because right when they're about to have peace, Logan throws a wrench in the plan and kills the son of Rattleneck. Is that his name? And
Is it Rattleneck? Rattle Shirt is Song of Ice and Fire, right? Rattle something.
rattle something. But as I thought about it more, here I this conflict, this internal conflict as I'm reading these stories is Logan a good person deep down? I know he's done a lot of bad, but is he at his core a good person, or does he want to do good? And I know
No,
you're shaking your head. No.
no, I'm tired of
And
Logan. He can die in a ditch.
yeah, well, I feel a little bit differently. But this story, Bethad is not the victim I feel that this story portrays him to be, because he's used Logan and spilled a lot of blood. And now that he's gotten far, he's saying, I don't want to spill any more blood. I just want peace. But it's a very hypocritical thing to do. He's kind of climbed to the top on a mountain of bodies, and now he's saying, let's just forget about the mountain of bodies.
Uh-huh.
Uh, let's just have peace. That's all I want. And despite the story showing him as a little bit more of an altruist, I think he's more of just a hypocrite. And he's kind of fed Logan, because of the Bloody Nine. Logan has this addiction to killing almost, and he's fed this addiction. It's like he's
Yeah,
giving a
yeah,
drug addict his drug, his fix, and they
right.
need more and more and more of it. And finally he's like, no, you don't get your drug anymore, you don't get your fix. And the drug addict's like, what, like, I need that, it's
Yeah, you've given it to me before.
yeah.
What gives? Yeah.
And I think it's what ultimately makes me come back to the fact that Logan deep down is a good person, or he has good inside of him, is that he always, despite his this cycle of killing that he gets himself into, he tries to break out of it, and he's trying to better himself. Yeah, he falls back into it, um like we see in Country, after he's given it up for a while. I mean, so he's a murderer for Bethod, and then Bethod, I don't know, expels him, kicks him out, and when we follow him in the first trilogy, he seems to be a better person, and that he's not actively trying to kill people. He's generally leading people to do good things, trying to
Yeah,
do
he's
stuff.
set up as the hero, really, when
Yeah.
the first trilogy starts.
And at the end of the first trilogy, I think he's fallen a little bit more back into his murderous side, but
Yeah,
he tries to push that off again. And we see in Red Country, once again, at the beginning of the story, he's for years, he's almost cowardly in Shy's. He is cowardly in Shy's perspective,
he's
because he's
Lamb. Yeah,
yeah, he's lamb. He's cowardly as a lamb, and his name is also Lamb, or that's what Shy calls him. And then he gets kind of a taste of the drug again, and he starts to fall back in his old ways.
hmm
And at the end of Red Country, you're not really sure where he's going. I'd like to think that he's not going to fall back into his old ways, but who knows? Maybe I'll be proved wrong. That was my long Logan rant. That was
yeah,
a little bit outside of the scope, and my perspective on this last story which is obviously a bit more controversial than or different from what other people might think. Let's hear what you thought about it, Stephen.
So I jokingly say that I would like to have Logan die in a ditch, and I think I would be fine with that. I feel like we still don't know enough to make a real determination on is Logan good at his core, or does he have goodness inside of him? And the reason why I say that is I think we have to know more about what the Bloody Nine actually is. Like, how much influence does it have over him? How much does it override his free will? Because if it is something that indeed is like a demon that takes over him after he kills, and he does not any longer have control over who he is, or it tempts him so much, or it feeds into an addiction that he cannot control, then I think we have to be a little more apologetic towards Logan and recognize that he has a severe handicap in being good if there is like a literal demon that's making him into this monstrous murderer. But if the Bloody Nine is more of just like an alter ego type of thing that he can choose to go in and out of, really, and he really does want to kill, then I think we settle on the die in a ditch. That's my take on Logan.
Yeah. So basically, Raffo.
But we probably won't. I don't expect Logan to be back. I think we've seen the last of him.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess we'll read a little hatred and probably find something out.
I thought I read somewhere that Joe Abercrombie was expecting Logan. He was expecting to be done with Logan after the first trilogy. And then there's, with Red Country, he had an opportunity to tell a little bit more about where Logan.
Yeah, I think someone on our Discord was informing us of those words of Joe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then we probably won't see Logan anymore, and we won't get any further answers.
I think it's amazing. You kind of referenced this, but it's amazing how even though you're reading words on the page in Sharpens in the Made a Monster story that directly describe what's happening, you know from other events that have happened that the perspective you're getting is flawed, and that we can't necessarily take Bethod at his word and think that he's this peaceful, great leader guy because of what we read earlier. And so there's that whole underlying tension of the story, like, doesn't quite compute in your head. That's amazing.
Yeah. What is it? It's like where the narrator might not necessarily be truthful, or your perspective isn't
the unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Trope. Yeah. It's a little bit of that. I mean, the narrator's reliable in the sense that they're telling you the story. They're not directly lying to the reader, but we know that there's a lot more to the story. We know that Bethod is going to go on to make this deal with the Shenka and plunge the North into years more of war. So even though he says peace and seems like this awesome leader, and Logan's just screwing it all up, really, there's more to it than that.
And he gets in league with Bethod too.
Logan does?
Oh, not Logan. Sorry. Bethod.
Oh, with Baez.
With Baez. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was getting Baez and Bethod mixed up. So
Baez, the real big bad.
Yeah. Seriously.
Palpatine.
When are we going to see the showdown between Baez and Khalul?
Yeah, are we? I don't know. That seems like something that you would expect in an epic fantasy, but I don't know if we expect it with Abercrombie.
Yeah. Throw your expectations out the window, I guess.
Yeah. I expect further conflict with these two sides. It's been set up so much. We've got to have more conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Abercrombie's now set the table. He can do a whole lot of stuff in the next trilogy. And I've heard great things about the first book. And I think the initial reads on Trouble with Peace are also really positive. So really looking forward to getting into those. I'll let you know how they are without spoilers.
So who are you going to do the episodes with, Stephen? Just yourself?
We'll have to find some other content creators out there.
Okay.
Yeah, I know there's some other fans out there. And so we'll probably do some collaboration episodes on those ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Ryan. I guess this episode did turn into a full-length episode because there's always a lot to say about our man Joe. But if you like Phantology, we are online at www.phantologybooks.com, on social media at Phantology Books. Check us out on Discord and let us know the mistakes that we just made, please fact check us, because we are always making mistakes. We are just fans of the series, and we know there are more passionate experts out there. We'd love to have those people come onto our Discord and start some more conversations. Let us know your theories and takes, etc. Please do so. We'd love to continue to grow our community. So, Ryan, this has been good. Thank you.
Are we going to do our top 3?
Oh, you're right. Let's do our top 3. Yeah, I'll probably cut that back a little bit, but yeah, okay. Let's briefly, as we wrap up here, let's go through and each one of us give our top 3. So, do you want to go first? Top 3 stories in Sharpens?
Yeah, I'll give my top 3. I don't think they are in any particular order. But the last story with Bethod and Logen,
Made a Monster.
Made a Monster. That was hit me in all the feels. That was one of my top 3. The other one was Two's Company. I just thought that was a fun story to read. I love the back and forth between Weirin and Javra. And the other one in my top 3 is going to go to Hell, I believe it's called, with Kadia.
And Temple.
And Mamoon. That was also very interesting how it depicted Mamoon and the Eaters, and Kadia as well.
Okay, I'll give you my top 3. Number 3, I'm also going to put Made a Monster in there because of all of the discussion that it creates and the new ways we can view some of these characters. I think that's a great thing to introduce into a collection of short stories. So that's number 3. Number 2, I'm going to say I want a Javra and Chev story in there. You already took Two's Company. Two's Company is solid, but I'm going to take Tough Times All Over because I just love this idea of the package that contains the mysterious nothing. And I love all these multiple viewpoint type. I love this way of writing. So that's number 2. And number 1, which I'm shocked this story is not loved as much as I loved it. But number 1 is Freedom. I just love the writing here. I think it was hilarious the entire time. I was so into the dark wit here, and actually ran into a Reddit poll asking for people to vote on their favorite Sharpens stories. And no one, there was 0 votes for Freedom. So I don't know what's wrong with you guys. Freedom is clearly the best story.
Well, it is. I mean, I think that the subreddit for the First Law is very underappreciated. There's not a lot of contributors to that. So how many votes total were there?
There were tens of votes at least.
Tens of votes? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think the top one had 40 something. I don't remember what it was offhand.
Okay. All right.
All right. So thanks for listening to Phantology. Check us out online and hop on Discord, and please let us know your opinions. And we will see you guys all next time.
Good to discuss another Joe Abercrombie novel.
See you, Ryan.
See ya.